but it is an example of government excess and dropping the ball, isn't it?
Well, it also hasn't been a great year for the private sector either, partly because the private sector often entwines itself with government. And in airports, you know, part of the problem, one of the reasons why more people fly now than they did 30 years ago is because airline ticket prices were deregulated, but the second half of deregulation never happened in the United States. It has happened in Europe, but the airports should have been privatized long ago, and they're not. They're still government entities. The air traffic system is still a government entity, and they are lagging behind where the deregulated part of the system goes.
Harry,
there are a lot of...
Thank you, Nick. Harry, you're in Los Angeles. If you had to come to New York, you'd probably fly. Would you feel safer if the city or the county of Los Angeles operated that airport, or if the airlines that have invested billions in their assets operated that airport and decided who could get on the planes and who couldn't?
Private companies, by far, do a much better job at practically everything. In this case, I think the fundamental, though, is that we should be attacking them militarily. We should be on offense, not hunkering down in defense and subjecting our own citizens to being treated like cattle.
Go ahead, Stu.
Look,
Because I want to get into this $160 billion borrowing.
Okay, well, all right, let me go straight to it.
Okay. Next week, the government is planning to make the largest acquisition in the debt markets that it's ever made. It's going to go out and look for $160 billion. A, what does it have to do in order to get there? And B, can it raise that kind of money?
Yes, it can raise that kind of money. The question is what price? It will put out bids, in other words. Who's going to lend us the money? They're hoping that tons of people want to lend a great deal of money. They will lend $160 billion, but there's risk involved, risk that the government some way down the road won't be able to repay, so those lenders will demand a higher price, a higher interest rate, and it becomes more expensive for us to borrow.
Harry, how long will it take the government to spend $160 billion?
By the end of the afternoon. But, you know, there won't be any solution to the debt problem until the government gives up the idea that people have a right to be taken care of by other people's earnings. It's the doctrine of need as a claim that I, as an objectivist, challenge here, not just the debt.
Well, Gillespie, the big government progressives in both parties have succeeded in moving the fulcrum of the debate from whether the government should take care of us to how the government should take care of us. Harry makes a very, very interesting point. Why don't we debate, or why are there so few voices, except perhaps the four of us and Glenn, suggesting that the issue of whether the government should do this is a moral and constitutional issue that should be explored, Nick?
Here, I mean, there is a debate going on. It's not happening in Congress. It didn't happen in Congress when President Bush and the Republicans pushed the Medicare prescription drug benefit earlier in the aughts. And it's not happening now in the way that it should about health care reform, about TARP, about the stimulus spending, about the second stimulus spending, which is probably about 10 minutes away from coming into view. But it is happening. And one of the things that is very heartening about the past year's political shenanigans, economic shenanigans, is that all of this stuff is genuinely unpopular among the people in America.
Right. Yes,
politicians don't get it, but they are the lagging indicator of where the country is at.
Is it
TARP was
conceivable?
not popular, stimulus was not popular, health care reform, such as it is not popular.
Nick is absolutely right. Absolutely right. This administration believes in the freedom from. America traditionally believed in the freedom to.
All right.
The freedom to. The freedom to go and do things as individuals. This administration wants the freedom from all kinds of things.
All right. They want to spend $160 billion. Is it conceivable that some country would demand security for the $160 billion? Might the Chinese government say, give us a mortgage on Yellowstone National Park to make sure you pay this debt back?
That is inconceivable, but what you're getting at is down the road when we've borrowed ourselves up to the hilt, lenders won't lend.
Harry, is it conceivable that lenders won't lend, even though the American government usually pays back its debt, albeit in cheaper dollars?
Certainly, because they don't want to receive the cheaper dollars. I think in the near future there's going to be a shift out of the dollar into gold as the reserve currency, at least unofficially, if not officially. And the Chinese are at the tipping point now, I believe.
Well, Harry, I've got to tell you, the government in the United Kingdom its debt rating has already been questioned. It's only a matter of time before the same thing happens in America if we spend and borrow like we are.
Nick Gillespie, before we go, what kind of political headaches will the president have if the Senate version of the health care bill passes and everyone who receives health care from their employer has to pay an income tax on the value of that health care?
Yeah, this is going to be a huge problem. You know, hopefully it'll sink this reform, but it will be a huge problem because it will be hitting middle-class people in a big way. It will completely rip the lid off the idea that there was not going to be a tax on the middle class coming from the Obama administration, which may then spark a revolt or a rebellion and an actual discussion. And maybe, just maybe, we can get a health care reform bill that actually would bring the market into health care rather than just paying off insurance companies, drug companies, and political hacks.
But we won't hold our breaths. Nick Gillespie, Harry Binswanger, Stuart Varney, thanks very much for joining us. Not just the economy, but threat from terrorists. Yes, next.